Shahir, Phoenix Shahir 2, New Mexico. Everyone believed she had fallen, until the X-rays revealed the secret of all those years. In a moment, you will witness the moment that changed everything in the hospital corridor. Watch until the end, and let's witness together how Lucy's silence turned into courage. The silence in the emergency room at Phoenix General Hospital was broken when the automatic doors swung open. Roberto entered carrying Lucy in his arms. Her face, swollen and bruised, contrasted with the firmness in his voice as he shouted for help. "Please help me!" My wife fell down the stairs. The nurses immediately rushed over with a stretcher. As they carefully placed her on it, Lucy did not utter a single moan despite the obvious pain she must have been feeling. Her eyes, one of them almost closed due to the swelling, remained fixed on the floor. It seemed as if her mind was elsewhere, far from that hospital, far from the man who now held her hand with a tense, controlling grip. "What exactly happened?" asked the receptionist as she filled out the admission form. "I already told you, she fell down the stairs at our house. She was coming down with clothes to attend to and lost her balance," Roberto replied with a disturbing confidence, like someone who had rehearsed his answer too well. "I was in the kitchen and only heard the crash." Lucy still didn't speak. A slight tremor ran through her body when the nurse tried to take her blood pressure. Roberto did not let go of her hand, even when they invited him to sit in the waiting room. "I'd rather stay with her if you don't mind." Nurse Carmela, with more than 20 years of experience at that hospital, exchanged a meaningful glance with her colleague. There was something about the situation that didn't add up. The way Lucy flinched every time her husband made a move, how she avoided looking anyone directly in the eye, the stubborn silence she maintained, even when asked if she was in pain. "Sir, we need to take her to radiology to rule out fractures. You'll have to wait here." Roberto's expression tensed for a moment. "I'll be right here, my love," he said to Lucy with a sweetness that contrasted with the stiffness of his posture. He leaned down to kiss her on the forehead, and she closed her eyes tightly, as if anticipating something worse than a kiss. As they walked away down the hall, Carmela noticed the marks peeking out from under the sleeve of Lucy's sweater, old bruises of different shades that told a very different story from that of a simple fall. In the radiology room, far from Roberto's watchful gaze, Lucy finally let out a sob, stifled as they helped her change position for the imaging. "How long ago did you fall, sweetheart?" Carmela asked gently. "This morning," Lucy replied in a thread of a voice, the first time she had spoken since arriving. "And these bruises here?" Carmela gently pointed to marks on her forearm that were clearly older. Lucy's eyes filled with tears, but she did not respond. Her silence spoke volumes. "I've been a nurse for 20 years, Carmela continued. "I've seen many falls downstairs, and I've also seen many things that aren't falls downstairs." Lucy closed her eyes tightly, as if trying to hold back a flood that threatened to overflow. "If there's anything you want to tell us, we're here to help you," Carmela added, gently placing her hand on Lucy's. "Whatever you tell us will stay between us." For a moment, it looked like Lucy was going to speak. Her lips parted, trembling, but then she remembered something. Her gaze shifted toward the door, as if she feared Roberto might be on the other side, listening. "I fell," she repeated firmly, though her broken voice betrayed the lie. "I just fell down the stairs." Dr. Mendez entered at that moment with the preliminary results of the X-rays. His expression hardened as he reviewed the images. "Ma'am, you have 2 fractured ribs, as well as multiple contusions," he explained professionally. "But I also see evidence of previous fractures that did not heal properly. Have you had any other accidents recently?" Lucy shook her head, but her whole body was shaking. Dr. Mendez and Carmela exchanged a knowing glance. "We're going to need to do more tests," said the doctor. "We'll have to admit her for observation." When they returned to the emergency room, Roberto immediately got up, approaching with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "How is my wife? Can we go home now?" "I'm sorry, sir, but your wife needs to be hospitalized," Dr. Mendez replied, with a firmness that left no room for discussion. "She has fractures that require attention and observation." Roberto's smile disappeared instantly. His fists clenched involuntarily. "But I can take care of her at home, doctor. I don't think it's necessary." "It's protocol," interrupted the doctor. "Besides, There are some routine questions we need to ask your wife, alone." Roberto's eyes narrowed, and for a second everyone could see what Lucy saw every day at home, a contained rage that promised to erupt at any moment. "I'm her husband," he said through clenched teeth. "There's nothing you need to talk to them about that I can't hear." Lucy, lying on the stretcher, closed her eyes. A single tear rolled down her cheek as her body tensed in anticipation of what would come next when they were alone again, because there was always an after, and that after was always worse. What she didn't know was that this time, Dr. Mendez had seen enough. While Carmela prepared her for transfer to the ward, he discreetly walked away to his office, where he picked up the phone to make a call that would change the course of the horror story that Lucy had been living in silence for years. Room 204 of the General Hospital of Phoenix had fallen silent after the nurses finished settling Lucy in. It was almost 11 p.m. when Dr. Mendez entered again with a folder in his hand. Roberto, who had refused to leave despite the fact that visiting hours were over, watched him suspiciously from the corner of the room. "Mr. Gutierrez, I need you to come with me to fill out some insurance paperwork," said the doctor with studied calm. "It's standard procedure for domestic accidents." Roberto clenched his jaw. His knuckles turned white on the back of the chair. "You can't do it here. I don't want to leave my wife alone. These are administrative forms," insisted the doctor. "It won't take more than 15 minutes. Besides, your wife needs to rest." Lucy lay motionless in bed, her gaze lost in the ceiling. When Roberto finally nodded and headed for the door, she counted her breaths. The doctor gave her a reassuring look and followed Roberto out. As soon as the doors closed, Nurse Daniel entered through another door, the one connecting to the nursing station. It was no coincidence. Everything had been carefully orchestrated by the medical team. "Ms. Lucia, I'm Danielle, the nurse on duty tonight." He introduced himself in a low voice as he checked the monitors. "I'm going to take some additional vital signs, if you'll allow me." Lucy nodded slightly when Daniel gently lifted the sleeve of her hospital gown to put on the blood pressure cuff. His professional expression didn't change, but his eyes meticulously registered every mark on Lucy's skin. Bruises in different stages of healing, from deep purple to the greenish yellow of the oldest ones. Small circular marks near her shoulder, consistent with cigarette burns. A pattern of fine scars on the inside of her arm. "The pain medication should be taking effect," Daniel commented as he wrote something down in the file. "Are you feeling any relief?" "Yes, thank you," Lucy replied, her voice barely audible. Daniel worked with gentle but efficient movements, documenting each injury without commenting directly on them. He had been trained for these cases. He knew that confronting a victim of domestic violence abruptly could cause them to shut down even more. "I need to check the rest of your bruises for the medical record," he explained. "May I?" After Lucy nodded, Daniel proceeded to examine the multiple injuries on her torso and back with professionalism and respect. The story written on her skin was devastating. Belt marks, bruises shaped to suggest blows with specific objects, patterns of defensive injuries on her forearms and hands. Despite his training, Daniel had to make an effort to keep his expression neutral. In his 5 years working in the emergency room, he had seen similar cases, but the extent and systematic nature of the abuse shown on Lucy's body was shocking. "I know this may be uncomfortable," he said softly as he covered Lucy with the sheet again, "but it's important to document everything for your proper treatment." What he didn't mention was that this documentation would also be crucial for any subsequent legal proceedings. At that moment, Nurse Carmela entered with a digital tablet in her hands. Her eyes met Daniel's, who gave her an almost imperceptible gesture. "Lucy, I brought you some tea," Carmela said, placing a steaming cup on the bedside table. "Dr. Mendez is keeping your husband busy with paperwork. It will take a while." Something in the way she said it made Lucy look up. "Why are they doing this?" she asked in a whisper. Carmela sat down next to the bed and took Lucy's hand in hers, careful not to press on the bruises. "Because we've seen the results of your x-rays, Lucy. They don't just show today's fractures. They also excuse old fractures, some poorly healed due to lack of timely medical attention." Daniel approached with the open file. "You have 3 ribs with evidence of previous fractures. a fracture in the radius that was never properly treated, and signs of previous head trauma. He listed in a professional but gentle voice. These injury patterns are inconsistent with a fall down the stairs, especially when considered together. Lucy closed her eyes, silent tears running down her cheeks. "Your body doesn't lie, Lucy," Carmela added, "and we're here to help you, not judge you." At the administration desk, several hallways away, Dr. Mendez kept Roberto busy with a mountain of unnecessary forms. Meanwhile, in a nearby office, the hospital social worker, Veronica Sanchez, was already on the phone with the authorities. Back in the room, Lucy seemed to be fighting an internal battle. Her hands trembled as she held the cup of tea. "If I say anything, if I talk," her voice began, broken with fear. "There are protocols for these cases," Daniel explained. "You won't have to go back to him if you don't want to. They don't understand." Lucy shook her head, terror evident in her eyes. "He always says that if I ever leave him, he'll find me, that no one will believe me, because he has friends in the police." Carmela and Daniel exchanged glances. It wasn't the first time they had heard similar threats. "Dr. Mendez has already contacted the Special Prosecutor's Office for Crimes Against Women," Carmela revealed, "not the local police." Daniel opened a folder and took out a series of photographs he had taken surreptitiously while examining Lucy. "In addition, we have documented evidence of your injuries, X-rays showing a history of fractures, and you are not the first person to come here with a history of falls that turn out to be something else." Lucy looked up in surprise. "Are there others like me?" "More than you can imagine," Carmela replied sadly, "but there are also many who manage to get out and rebuild their lives." A noise in the hallway made Lucy jump. Her instinctive reaction, that visceral fear of any sudden sound, was perhaps the most compelling evidence of the terror in which she lived. "He'll be back any minute," she whispered, panic growing in her voice. Daniel approached the door and looked down the hallway. "Dr. Mendez will keep him busy a little longer," he assured her. "But we need to know, Lucy, do you want our help?" The room fell silent. For Lucy, it was like standing on the edge of a precipice. Her entire adult life had been under Roberto's control. 6 years of marriage that had gradually become a prison of fear and pain. 6 years in which every attempt to escape had been discovered and punished with increasing brutality. But now, for the first time, there were people who saw through the facade. People who not only saw the bruises, but understood the system of terror in which she lived. "If I say yes," she finally murmured, "what will happen next?" The question hung in the air as footsteps approached in the hallway, firm and rapid footsteps that Lucy would recognize anywhere. Footsteps that for years had announced that the pain was about to begin. Dr. Mendez appeared at the door just before Roberto, strategically blocking the entrance to the room. "Mr. Gutierrez, we still have some documents to sign today," he said with professional firmness. "Besides, your wife has just been given a sedative for the pain. She needs to rest undisturbed for the next few hours." Roberto peered over the doctor's shoulder, trying to see Lucy. His normally calculating eyes now showed a mixture of frustration and suspicion. "I want to see her before I leave," he insisted, his voice tense as a string about to snap. "I assure you, she is in good hands," replied the doctor without moving an inch. "Hospital policy is clear. After 10 p.m., only medical personnel are allowed in the rooms." Daniel and Carmela had strategically positioned themselves next to Lucy, continuing with routine procedures, as if the tense conversation at the door were not happening. "Look," Dr. Mendez continued, lowering his voice slightly, "I understand your concern, but your wife needs specialized treatment. Her fractures are serious and require constant monitoring. Tonight," Roberto clenched his fists at his sides. For a moment it looked as if he was going to push the doctor aside to get in, but something in Dr. Mendez's firm presence, and perhaps the awareness of being in a public place with witnesses, made him hold back. "I'll be back first thing tomorrow morning," he finally warned, staring at the doctor. It wasn't a promise. It was a veiled threat. "Visiting hours start at 9 a.m., the doctor replied calmly. "The receptionist will give you a pass when you arrive." After a tense silence, Roberto finally backed away. He glanced one last time toward the bed, where he could barely make out Lucy's outline, before turning on his heel and leaving with heavy footsteps that echoed down the hallway. Dr. Mendez waited until the footsteps faded into the distance before closing the door and approaching the bed. "He's gone, but he'll be back tomorrow," he said, addressing Lucy directly. "We have until then to decide how to proceed." Lucy, who had remained stiff as a board throughout the confrontation, finally exhaled. It was as if she had been holding her breath from the moment she heard Roberto's footsteps. "I can't," she whispered. Silent tears slid down her cheeks. "You don't understand. He always carries out his threats." Dr. Mendez pulled up a chair and sat down next to the bed, adopting a posture that was not intimidating. His voice when he spoke was soft but clear. "Lucy, I've been a doctor for 25 years. I've seen cases like yours more times than I care to remember." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "What I see in your x-rays and in your body tells me that if you go back home with him, the next time I see you could be in the morgue." The harshness of his words made Lucy close her eyes tightly, as if trying to block out a truth that deep down she knew. "No one should live in constant fear," added Carmela, who had kept a respectful distance. "And no one deserves to be hurt by the person who claims to love them." Lucy brought a trembling hand to her face, gently touching the swelling under her eye. "It wasn't like that at first," she murmured so softly that everyone had to lean in to hear her. "He was attentive. He brought me flowers. He told me I was the most beautiful woman he had ever met." "When did he change?" Daniel asked gently as he continued to adjust the IV drip. Lucy seemed to sink into her memories, her gaze lost somewhere in the past. Little by little, first it was jealousy. He didn't like how other men looked at me. Then he started controlling my clothes, my outings, my friends. She paused, her breathing ragged. "The first time he hit me was 3 months after the wedding. He apologized so much he cried. He swore it would never happen again. But it did happen again," Dr. Mendez added. Not as a question, but as confirmation of a pattern he had seen countless times. Lucy nodded, her body shaking with silent sobs. It got worse and worse, and each time he had a reason: that she hadn't cleaned properly, that the food was cold, that she had spent too much at the supermarket, or simply that he had had a bad day at work. The room fell silent as the medical staff absorbed the weight of her confession. It wasn't just Lucy's story. It was echoes of hundreds of similar stories, of lives trapped in cycles of violence that intensified until they became lethal. "Do you have family, Lucy?" asked Veronica Sanchez, the social worker who had just quietly entered the room. "Someone you could stay with?" Lucy shook her head. "Roberto made me distance myself from everyone. My family lives in New Mexico. I haven't seen them in 3 years. He told them I didn't want to talk to them. He changed my phone number. And friends, co-workers, Veronica insisted. I stopped working after we got married. He said it wasn't necessary, that he could support us." Lucy let out a bitter laugh, devoid of humor. "It was his way of controlling me, without my own money, without contacts, without anyone to turn to." Veronica took notes on her tablet, nodding occasionally. "Lucy, there are options," she finally said. "There is a shelter for women in situations of violence here in Phoenix. It is a safe place with 24-hour protection. No one can enter without authorization, and its location is confidential." "And then what?" Lucy's voice had a hint of desperation. "Where will I go? What will I do? I have nothing, not even my ID. Roberto keeps all my documents locked away." "There are support programs," Veronica explained. "Free legal advice, psychological support, job training, even help reconnecting with your family if that's what you want. But first," Dr. Mendez intervened, "we need your consent to file a formal complaint. With the medical evidence we have collected, there is a solid basis for a domestic violence case." Fear instantly returned to Lucy's eyes. "I'll have to see him in court, face him. There are procedures to avoid that direct contact," Veronica assured her. "And we can request immediate protective measures." Lucy closed her eyes. Physical and emotional exhaustion began to weigh on her. 6 years of constant terror did not dissipate with a simple conversation, with promises of help, however sincere they may have been. "What if it doesn't work?" she whispered. "What if he manages to find me? What if the judge doesn't believe me?" Dr. Mendez looked at the monitors recording Lucy's vital signs. Her heart rate had increased, reflecting her growing anxiety. "Lucy," he said gently, "I understand your fear is completely valid after what you've been through. but there's something you need to know." He paused, making sure he had her full attention. "If you don't take this opportunity now, you probably won't get another one." The words hung in the air, heavy with their terrible truth. "What your husband has done to you is not love," Carmela added. "Love doesn't leave bruises. Love doesn't break bones. Love doesn't isolate or terrorize." A single tear rolled down Lucy's cheek. "I'm so scared," she finally confessed, her voice barely audible. "Oh, I know," replied Dr. Mendez. "But sometimes the path to overcoming fear begins with the most terrifying decision of all." Veronica approached, offering her a tissue. "You don't have to decide everything tonight," she said. "For now, you're safe here. Roberto can't come in without authorization, and we've alerted the security staff." Lucy took the handkerchief with trembling fingers. For the first time since she arrived at the hospital, she looked directly at Veronica, without looking away. If she decided to speak, she began by choosing each word carefully, like someone testing the strength of ice before stepping on it. What exactly should she say? It was barely a whisper, a tiny crack in the wall of silence and fear she had built around herself over the years. But to everyone in that room, it sounded like the first ray of light after a long, stormy night. "Just the truth, Lucia," Veronica replied with a small, encouraging smile. "That's all. Okay?" And so, in the stillness of room 204, as night fell over Phoenix and the hospital gradually sank into silence, Lucy began to speak. At first, her voice was broken, with long pauses and frequent tears, but little by little, she grew more confident. Words she had kept inside for years finally found their way into the light, while Veronica carefully recorded her testimony. What neither of them knew was that at that very moment, Roberto had not gone home as he had promised. He was in the hospital parking lot in his car, staring at the lit windows on the second floor, with growing fury and a plan forming in his mind. The early morning hours passed slowly at the General Hospital of Phoenix. It was almost 4 a.m. when Lucy finally fell asleep, exhausted after hours of recounting the 6 years of hell she had lived with Roberto. Her statement, recorded and documented by Veronica Sanchez, filled dozens of pages with chilling episodes of violence. At the nursing station, Dr. Mendez reviewed the results of the additional tests he had ordered. Lucy's complete clinical picture was even more worrying than they had initially thought. In addition to recent and old fractures, she showed signs of mild malnutrition, anemia, and a weakened immune system due to chronic stress. "It's a miracle she's lasted this long," said Carmela, who had stayed beyond her shift to support the case. "Unfortunately, it's not unusual," replied the doctor, rubbing his tired eyes. "The human body can withstand astonishing amounts of abuse, especially when fear keeps us functioning in survival mode." Daniel entered at that moment, returning from his round down the hall. "All quiet for now," he reported. "The security guard is stationed near the room, as requested." Dr. Mendez nodded gratefully for his team's dedication. It wasn't the first time they had handled a domestic violence case, but the severity of Lucy's situation had struck a chord with all of them. "The special prosecutor's office will send someone first thing in the morning," said Veronica, who had also stayed late finishing the paperwork. "With any luck, we'll be able to get a protection order before he returns." What none of them knew was that the threat was closer than they imagined. Roberto had not gone home. After spending hours in his car, watching the building and smoking one cigarette after another, he had found a service entrance with minimal security. Dressed in his dark clothes and moving with the caution of someone accustomed to stalking, he had managed to infiltrate the hospital. At 5:40 in the morning, when the shift change began to generate movement in the hallways, Roberto mingled with the cleaning staff, his head down, advancing with determination toward the second floor. In room 204, Lucy woke up with a start. It wasn't a noise that interrupted her sleep, but that feeling she had developed over years of abuse, the almost supernatural ability to sense danger approaching. The guard assigned to her hallway had gone to the bathroom, leaving the area momentarily unprotected. It was precisely then that Roberto appeared at the end of the corridor. Seeing him, a nurse on the morning shift who was unaware of the situation smiled kindly at him. "Good morning. Are you looking for a room?" "I'm here to see my wife," Roberto replied with a practiced smile. Room 204. Oh, it's too early for visitors. But the nurse consulted her watch hesitantly. I guess a few minutes won't hurt. Down that hallway on the right. Roberto nodded gratefully with a courtesy that would disappear as soon as he was alone with Lucy. He walked with determined steps toward the room, his mind already anticipating what he would do once he had her in front of him. He was furious. The way the doctors had treated him the night before, the suspicious looks, the clear intention to keep him away from his wife. He knew Lucy had spoken, and if there was one thing he couldn't tolerate, it was betrayal. 3 doors before reaching Lucy's room, Dr. Mendez came out of a consultation room. His eyes met Roberto's, and time seemed to stand still for a second. Mr. Gutierrez, visiting hours don't start until 9, said the doctor, his voice firm as he strategically blocked the hallway. I'm going to see how my wife is doing, Roberto replied, trying to maintain his composure. A nurse let me through. Dr. Mendez immediately noticed the tension in Roberto's jaw, the way his fists clenched and unclenched rhythmically. He recognized the signs of violence about to erupt. I'm sorry, but I must ask you to wait in the designated room. Your wife is in the middle of a procedure. Roberto took a step forward, invading the doctor's personal space. She's my wife, he hissed, abandoning all pretense of courtesy. I have the right to see her whenever I want. In this hospital, Mr. Gutierrez, we follow protocols, the doctor replied without backing down. And one of them is that only medical personnel have access to patients during procedures. As this confrontation unfolded, Daniel, who had returned to check on Lucy, noticed her agitation. What's wrong? He asked, alarmed by the sudden increase in her heart rate. He's here, Lucy whispered, terror evident in her wide eyes. I'm sorry. I always know when he's near. Daniel acted quickly, pressing the emergency button and grabbing his phone to alert security. He didn't question Lucy's intuition. He had worked with enough abuse victims to know that they developed a kind of radar to detect their attackers. In the hallway, the situation was escalating rapidly. Don't tell me what I can or can't do. Roberto's voice rose, attracting the attention of nearby nurses. I demand to see my wife right now. Mr. Gutierrez, I ask you to lower your voice, Dr. Mendez replied, remaining calm. We are in a hospital with patients who need to rest. I don't care. Roberto pushed the doctor, trying to get past him. Lucy, I know you're there. I'm coming in. It was that moment of physical violence that changed everything. 2 security guards responding to Daniel's alert appeared in the hallway, along with the nursing supervisor and another doctor who was on duty. Sir, I need you to calm down, said one of the guards, approaching cautiously. Can't you see this is a hospital? Roberto turned to them, rage completely transforming his face. You don't understand. That's my wife. You're preventing me from seeing her. This is illegal. What is illegal? Said a new voice from the end of the hallway. It's domestic abuse, Mr. Gutierrez. Everyone turned to see a middle-aged woman dressed in a formal suit, accompanied by 2 police officers. It was Prosecutor Claudia Ramirez from the Special Prosecutor's Office for Crimes Against Women. We have an emergency protection order issued early this morning, she continued, approaching with a document in her hand based on medical evidence and the testimony of Mrs. Lucy Gutierrez. Please accompany the officers. Roberto's face went from fury to bewilderment to calculation, all in a matter of seconds. He looked toward the door of Lucy's room, now visible since Dr. Mendez had moved. For a terrible moment, it seemed as if he was going to try to run toward her, but the guards and officers already surrounded him. This is a misunderstanding, he said, abruptly changing tactics. His voice became reasonable. My wife fell down the stairs. I brought her to the hospital. You can ask anyone at the reception desk. We have x-rays that show fractures in different stages of healing, Dr. Mendez replied, inconsistent with a recent fall. And we have your wife's full testimony with details of 6 years of systematic abuse, added Prosecutor Ramirez. Go with the officers willingly, Mr. Gutierrez, or it will be by force. Roberto looked around, assessing his options. For the first time since Lucy had known him, she saw something new in his eyes. Fear, the same fear he had inflicted for years. I want to talk to my lawyer, he finally demanded. That's your right, one of the officers conceded. You can call him from the prosecutor's office." As the police escorted him to the elevator, Roberto turned one last time toward the room where he knew Lucy was. "This isn't over," he shouted, his voice thick with menace. "Do you know what happens when you betray me, Lucy? Do you know that no one can protect you from me?" His words echoed in the hallway, sending chills down the spines of everyone present. These were not the words of an innocent man, confused by a misunderstanding. They were the final confirmation of everything Lucy had testified to during the night. Inside the room, Lucy trembled uncontrollably despite Daniel's efforts to calm her. Tears ran down her cheeks, but these were different from the ones the night before. They were tears of release, of disbelief, of a reality that was changing rapidly before her eyes. "They took him away," Daniel said softly, holding her hand. "The prosecutor is here. He can't hurt you now." Carmela, who had rushed into the room when she heard the commotion, adjusted the oxygen to help Lucy breathe better. "Everything came to light," Carmela said, gently stroking her hair. His lie collapsed like a house of cards. Prosecutor Ramirez entered the room after making sure Roberto had been removed from the building. Her expression was compassionate, but determined. "Mrs. Gutierrez, I am Claudia Ramirez from the Special Prosecutor's Office. I'm sorry you had to witness that scene." She approached the bed with slow movements. "But I want you to know that your testimony, along with the medical evidence, was enough to issue an immediate protection order. He cannot legally come near you." Lucy looked at her with eyes red from crying. "Really? They really took him away?" The prosecutor nodded. "He is currently on his way to the prosecutor's office to be processed. The charges are serious: assault, continued domestic violence, threats." She paused, looking at Lucy's bruised face. "With your testimony and the medical evidence, we have a solid case." "But he said—" Lucy paused, fear returning to her voice. "His threats only make his legal situation worse," the prosecutor explained. There they were heard by multiple witnesses, including police officers. For the first time since she arrived at the hospital, something resembling hope began to appear in Lucy's eyes. It was faint, fragile, but it was there. "What will happen now?" she asked in a whisper. The prosecutor sat down next to the bed. Her posture was professional but gentle. "A legal process is now beginning, but you will not be alone at any time," she explained. "There is a complete protocol for cases like yours. It includes free legal advice, psychological support, and most importantly, physical protection." Dr. Mendez entered at that moment, still visibly affected by the confrontation, but with an expression of determination. "Medically, you will need a few more days of hospitalization," said Lucy, "which gives us time to coordinate with the prosecutor's office and social services to transfer you to a safe place when you are discharged." "A safe place," repeated Lucy, as if the words were difficult to comprehend after years of living in constant danger. "A specialized shelter," explained the prosecutor, "with 24-hour security, comprehensive support, and most importantly, absolute confidentiality about its location." Lucy closed her eyes for a moment, overwhelmed by the amount of information and the radical change in her situation. In less than 24 hours, she had gone from being trapped in a seemingly inescapable cycle of violence to having a whole team of professionals working to protect her. "I'm scared," she finally confessed, opening her eyes to look at the prosecutor. "He always finds a way. He always comes back." Prosecutor Ramirez gently took her hand. "That's the cycle we're going to break, Lucy," she said with conviction. "What you did last night, speaking up, telling your truth, was the first step, and it was the hardest. Now you're not alone." At that moment, as if the universe wanted to confirm her words, the door opened again. Veronica Sanchez entered with a tired but satisfied smile. "I managed to locate them," she announced, addressing Lucy directly. "Your family in New Mexico. I spoke to your sister Ana." Lucy's face transformed into a mixture of disbelief and longing. "Ana? You spoke to her? How?" "With the information you gave me last night," Veronica explained. "It was easier than I thought. And Lucy, they're desperate to see you. Roberto told them you didn't want anything to do with them, that you decided to cut off all contact." A tear rolled down Lucy's cheek. But this time it was different. It wasn't a tear of terror or pain. "Will I be able to talk to them?" Your sister is taking a bus right now, Veronica replied. She'll arrive in Phoenix this afternoon. It was as if a final invisible weight had been lifted from Lucy's shoulders. Her body, still bruised and sore, seemed to relax visibly. Thank you, she whispered, looking at each person in the room. Thank you all. Outside, the sun was beginning to peek over the buildings of Phoenix, bathing the room in warm, golden light. It was a new day, in more ways than one. For Lucy, it was the first day of a life she was just beginning to imagine. A life without fear, without beatings, without constant threats. What she didn't know, as she allowed herself to feel that first ray of hope, was that the legal battle was just beginning, and that Roberto, from the patrol car that was taking him to the prosecutor's office, was already plotting his next move, because men like him didn't give up easily. And Phoenix, like many cities, had cracks in its justice system that he planned to slip through. Before continuing, we want to know more about you, where you are listening from. Leave us a comment with the name of your city or country. We would love to know how far our stories are reaching. The clock read 3:20 p.m. when Ana Vasquez hurried through the lobby of the General Hospital of Phoenix. Her face reflected the exhaustion of a 7-hour trip from New Mexico, but her eyes shone with a mixture of anxiety and hope. It had been 3 years since she last saw her younger sister. I'm here to see Lucy Gutierrez, she said, her voice slightly trembling as she identified herself at the reception desk. I'm her sister. The receptionist looked at her with an understanding expression. All the staff had been informed about the case. Of course, Miss Sanchez, the social worker, is waiting for you. One moment, please. As she waited, Ana couldn't help but imagine how she would find Lucy. Veronica's call that morning had been like a direct blow to the heart. For 3 years, the entire family had tried to contact Lucy, always receiving excuses from Roberto, or, in the last year, simply silence. They never believed that Lucy had decided to cut ties voluntarily, but neither did they imagine the hell she was going through. Ana turned to find a middle-aged woman with a folder in her hands and a professional but warm expression. I'm Veronica Sanchez. We spoke on the phone. Thank you for coming so quickly. How is she? It was the first thing Ana managed to say as she followed Veronica to the elevators. Veronica chose her words carefully. Physically, she is stable. The fractures will heal with time. Emotionally, she paused. She has taken a huge step in talking about the abuse, but the road will be long. Ana nodded, holding back tears. We never imagined. We knew Roberto was controlling, but we thought maybe it was just silly jealousy. Not that he could. Her voice broke. It's important that you understand something before you see her, Veronica said as the elevator rose to the second floor. Victims of prolonged violence often develop coping mechanisms that can seem confusing from the outside. You might hear her defend Roberto at times, or blame herself. It's part of the process. I understand, Ana replied, although the idea that her sister could defend the man who had hurt her so much was incomprehensible to her. When they finally reached the door of room 204, Veronica paused. One more thing, don't react with visible horror when you see her injuries. Try to stay calm. She already feels embarrassed enough. Ana took a deep breath, preparing herself for what she would find on the other side of the door. Nothing, however, could have truly prepared her for the sight of her younger sister. Lucy was reclining in bed. Her face was still swollen and bruised. Although the swelling had subsided slightly, a bandage covered her torso to stabilize her broken ribs. But what struck Ana most was not the physical injuries, but the way Lucy seemed to have shrunk, as if she occupied less space than she was entitled to in the world. Lou called softly from the doorway. Lucy looked up, and for a second, seemed not to recognize her own sister. Then her eyes widened, and instantly filled with tears. Ana. The whisper was almost inaudible, but it contained 3 years of absence, of pain, of forced isolation. Ana crossed the room in 3 steps, and, taking infinite care not to hurt her fractured ribs, wrapped her sister in an embrace. The 2 women melted into silent tears, clinging to each other as if they feared that any separation could be permanent again. I'm so sorry, Lucy sobbed against her sister's shoulder. I should have told them. I should have asked for help. No, my child. No, Ana interrupted. stroking her hair as she had when they were little. "You don't have to apologize for anything. We are the ones who should have insisted more, who should have known." Veronica watched from the doorway, giving them space but remaining present. She had witnessed dozens of similar family reunions, and knew that this moment was crucial to Lucy's recovery process. After several minutes, when the initial sobs began to subside, Anna sat down on the chair next to the bed, without letting go of her sister's hand. "Mom and Dad are coming tomorrow," she said softly. "They wanted to come today, but Mom had to arrange a few days off from work. They couldn't believe it when I told them, all these years thinking you didn't want to see us." Lucy looked down, shame visible in every line of her face. "Roberto controlled everything. My phone, my emails, my outings. The few times I tried to contact them secretly," she shuddered, leaving the sentence incomplete. Anna squeezed her hand tighter, understanding what she didn't dare say. "It's over, Lou. He can't hurt you anymore. He's in custody." Veronica finally intervened, approaching us. "Prosecutor Ramirez confirmed that he will spend at least 72 hours in custody while the formal investigation is completed." "And then?" Anna asked, the concern evident in her voice. "That will depend on the judge," Veronica explained. "But with the medical evidence, Lucy's testimony, and the witnesses to this morning's incident, there is a solid basis for keeping him in custody while the process moves forward." Lucy, who had remained silent while listening, finally spoke. "He has friends," she said quietly. "People with influence. He always bragged about his contacts in the police, in the municipal government. That's why we're working with the specialized prosecutor's office," Veronica replied firmly. "Not with the local police. And that's also why we have a plan for when you're discharged, which will probably be in 2 days." "A plan?" Anna asked. "The shelter I told you about on the phone," Veronica said. "It's a safe place with 24-hour protection, and its location is confidential. Lucy can stay there while the legal process moves forward." Anna looked at her sister, then at Veronica. "She can't come with us to New Mexico. She would be far away from him with her family." Veronica had expected this question. It was natural for families to want to keep their loved ones close after such a long and traumatic separation. "That's a possibility," she acknowledged, "but there are legal considerations. While the case is open here in Phoenix, Lucy will need to be available for additional statements, identifications, and interviews with the prosecutor's office. In addition, the abuser knows your family's address." Lucy visibly tensed at this last sentence. "Roberto knows where you live," she confirmed, fear returning to her voice. "He has the address, photos of the house. He would show them to me sometimes to prove that he could get to you if I tried anything." Anna paled at the revelation, understanding for the first time the extent of the control and intimidation her sister had endured. "We can move," she suggested weakly. "Or we can follow the protocol that has already proven to work in similar cases," Veronica countered gently. "The shelter isn't just a place to hide, Anna. It's a space for comprehensive recovery with psychological support, legal advice, and training for financial independence." Lucy, who had remained silent while the two women discussed her future, finally spoke up. "Can I think about it?" she asked in a firmer voice than before. "I want to see my parents first. Talk to them." Veronica nodded, pleased to see Lucy beginning to express her own desires and make decisions, however small. It was a crucial step on her road to recovery. "Of course, you have time to decide." The rest of the afternoon passed in a strange mixture of pain and healing. Anna brought Lucy up to date on the family, the nephew who had been born and whom she had never met, her parents' new house, and the thwarted plans they had had to visit her during those 3 years. With each story shared, each memory recovered, Lucy seemed to reclaim a small part of the identity that Roberto had tried to erase. At 6 p.m., Dr. Mendez came by to make his rounds. He greeted Anna warmly and checked Lucy's vital signs. "You're improving rapidly," he said with satisfaction. "The inflammation is subsiding, and your pain levels are more manageable. Right?" Lucy nodded. "It hurts less when I breathe." "Excellent. If everything continues like this, we can discharge you the day after tomorrow in the morning." After the doctor left, Carmela came in with the dinner tray. The nurse smiled when she saw Anna. "It's good that you have company now," she said to Lucy as she set the table. Hospital food always tastes better when there's someone to share it with, even if it's just conversation. Lucy looked at the tray, and then at Carmela. "Can I ask you something?" she said timidly. "Anything you want, dear. Last night when you stayed beyond your shift to help me, why did you do it?" The question surprised everyone in the room. Carmela stopped what she was doing and looked directly at Lucy. "Because 15 years ago, I was in a hospital bed very similar to yours," she replied softly, "and someone stayed beyond their shift to help me. Sometimes that's all we need to find the strength to keep going, to know that someone cares enough to stay." A meaningful silence filled the room. Lucy looked at the nurse with new eyes, realizing that she was facing someone who offered not only professional understanding, but empathy, born of personal experience. "And you? How did your story end?" she finally asked. Carmela smiled a genuine smile that lit up her face. "Freely," she replied. "It wasn't easy or quick. There were dark days, doubts, fear, but every small step took me further away from terror and closer to myself." She paused meaningfully. "And now I help others find their way." The revelation fell on Lucy like a gentle rain of hope. It wasn't just a story of survival. It was living proof that there was a future beyond abuse. "Do you think I can?" The question hung in the air. Too big, too fragile to be completed. "I'm sure you can," Carmela replied with conviction. "You've already taken the hardest step, Lucy. You've found your voice." As night began to fall over Phoenix, Room 204 had been transformed. It was no longer just a clinical space where physical wounds were treated. It had become a sanctuary where, word by word, hug by hug, Lucy was beginning to rebuild herself. Anna settled into the recliner that the nurses had prepared for her, flatly refusing to leave her sister alone that night. For the first time since her admission, Lucy slept peacefully, her hand intertwined with her sister's, even in her dreams. At the specialized prosecutor's office a few miles away, Prosecutor Ramirez reviewed the photographs of Lucy's injuries, comparing them with her testimony and the medical reports. The case was solid, but she knew that the next few days would be crucial. Roberto Gutierrez had already requested a private lawyer, and the rumors of his political connections were not unfounded. And in a preventive detention cell, Roberto Gutierrez stared at the gray ceiling, his mind calculating options, contacts, strategies. His fury had not diminished, it had only transformed into something cold and methodical. In his mind, this was not the end. It was simply a temporary obstacle on his way back to what he considered his. What none of them knew was that at that very moment, fate was weaving invisible threads that would connect their lives in ways none of them could foresee. Because sometimes, when a woman finds her voice after years of silence, the echo of that voice reaches unexpected places, touching lives beyond imagination. And Lucy's voice was just beginning to resonate. The morning light filtered softly through the half-drawn curtains of room 204. Lucy woke up slowly, disoriented for a moment, until her eyes met Anna's figure, sleeping uncomfortably in the recliner. It hadn't been a dream. Her sister was really there. The sound of the door opening made Anna sit up with a start, blinking to shake off her sleepiness. Nurse Carmela entered with a breakfast tray and a warm smile. "Good morning. How are we feeling today?" "Better," Lucy replied, and for the first time, she really meant it. The physical pain was still there, but something had changed inside her. While Carmela checked her vital signs, the door opened again. This time, two figures stopped in the doorway. A man in his 60s with graying hair and a restrained expression, and a petite woman whose face was an aged reflection of Lucy's. "Mom, Dad." Anna jumped up, surprised. "I thought you would be arriving later. We took the first bus in the morning," replied Doña Elena, her voice trembling, her eyes never leaving her youngest daughter. "We couldn't wait another minute." Don Hector remained slightly behind, as if afraid that a sudden movement might disrupt the delicate scene. His eyes, however, registered every detail of Lucy's battered face, and a shadow of pain and contained fury crossed his countenance. "My girl," whispered Doña Elena, finally approaching the bed. Lucy felt something break inside her. It wasn't the fragility of fear this time, but the wall she had built to contain her emotions for years. Tears flowed uncontrollably as her mother embraced her with infinite tenderness, as if she were once again that 5-year-old girl who had fallen off her bicycle and needed comforting. "I'm so sorry," Lucy sobbed. "I'm sorry, Mom, Dad." Don Hector then approached and sat on the edge of the bed. His hands, hardened by decades of work on the docks of New Mexico, took his daughters with surprising delicacy. "There's nothing to forgive, my little girl," he said in a hoarse voice. "Nothing." Carmela discreetly withdrew, leaving the family to their private meeting. Outside in the hallway, she ran into Veronica and Dr. Mendez, who were watching the scene through the window. "It's a good day," Carmela said, discreetly wiping away a tear. "Crucial," the doctor agreed. "Family reconnection is sometimes the most important pillar in the recovery of patients like Lucy." Veronica checked her watch. "Prosecutor Ramirez will be here at 11, she reported. "She wants to talk to the whole family about the next legal steps." Inside the room, the family reunion continued. Amid tears and hugs, Lucy discovered everything she had missed in those 3 years. The birth of her nephew Mateo, son of her older brother Miguel, who had been unable to come because he was in Monterrey, her father's early retirement after a minor injury, her mother's new venture selling homemade cakes. "We looked for you, my love," explained Doña Elena, holding her daughter's hand. "Miguel even went to your house twice, but that man always had excuses, that you were traveling, that you were sick, that you would call us when you were ready. And when you stopped answering the phone," continued Don Hector, "we went to the police in Phoenix. But they told us you were an adult, that they couldn't intervene without proof that something was wrong. Roberto changed my number constantly," explained Lucy, bitterness in her voice mingling with guilt. "And he would take my phone away for days, as punishment when I did something he didn't like." Don Hector's face darkened, but Anna quickly intervened. "Dad, that doesn't matter now," she said, recognizing the growing anger in her father's eyes. "The important thing is that Lucy is safe, and that we are together." A soft knock on the door interrupted the conversation. Veronica entered, accompanied by Prosecutor Claudia Ramirez, who carried a briefcase and had a professional but friendly expression. "Good morning," greeted the prosecutor. "I'm Claudia Ramirez from the Special Prosecutor's Office for Crimes Against Women. I'm glad to see the family together." After the introductions, the prosecutor took a seat and took several documents out of her briefcase. "Lucy, I want to inform you that Roberto Gutierrez's initial hearing is scheduled for tomorrow at 10 a.m. It will begin at 10 a.m. You don't need to be present. In fact, I would strongly recommend that you not be there." "What will happen at that hearing?" asked Don Hector, his tone protective. "The judge will determine whether there is sufficient evidence to initiate formal proceedings for domestic violence, serious injury, and threats," explained the prosecutor. "With the medical evidence, Lucy's testimony, and the witnesses to the incident at the hospital, we have a solid case for him to remain in pretrial detention while the process moves forward." And then, Lucy's voice was barely audible, "The legal process can take months," the prosecutor replied honestly. "There will be more hearings. We may require you to expand your statement, and eventually, if everything goes according to plan, a trial." Fear returned to Lucy's eyes. "I'll have to see him, be in the same room as him. There are protocols to prevent that," Ramirez assured her. "Video statements, privacy screens. We will do everything possible to protect you." Veronica, who had remained silent, then intervened. "That is why the post-hospital plan we discussed yesterday is so important. Lucy will be discharged tomorrow, and we need to decide today what is the best course of action." Don Hector sat up straight in his seat. "My daughter is coming with us to New Mexico," he stated firmly. "We'll all be there to take care of her." The prosecutor and Veronica exchanged glances. "I understand your desire to take Lucy home," Ramirez said tactfully. "But I must point out some risks. Mr. Gutierrez knows your family's address, according to what Lucy has told us. In addition, the legal process requires that Lucy remain accessible to the prosecutor's office during the investigation. We can move temporarily," Anna suggested. "Rent something here in Phoenix until all this is over." "Oh," Veronica interjected. "We can go ahead with the specialized shelter plan, where Lucy would have not only physical protection, but also ongoing psychological support and integrated legal advice." "A shelter?" Doña Elena's voice trembled. "Does it sound so lonely?" It's not, Veronica assured her. It's a supportive community with other women who have been through similar situations, professional counselors, and recovery and training activities. Everyone looked at Lucy, waiting for her opinion. For so many years, other people had made decisions for her. The pressure of having to choose now was overwhelming, but also strangely liberating. She began uncertainly, don't want to put my family in danger. Roberto is persistent and has connections. We're not afraid of that bastard, growled Don Hector. But I am, Dad, Lucy confessed with stark honesty. I'm terrified of him, and I don't want to live in fear that he'll hurt you because of me. The room fell silent as the weight of her words settled in. The shelter finally asked, looking at Veronica, "Could my family visit me there? Are there security protocols?" explained Veronica. Visits are arranged in neutral locations, never at the shelter itself to maintain the confidentiality of its location, but you could see your family regularly. Lucy took a deep breath, feeling a strange calm as she took control of her own life. Perhaps for the first time in a long time. I think the shelter is the best option for now, she finally said, at least until I don't feel so scared. Doña Elena stifled a sob, but nodded understandingly. Whatever you decide, my girl, we'll be with you every step of the way. Prosecutor Ramirez smiled slightly, approving of the decision. It's a wise choice, Lucy. It will make it easier for us to keep you safe during the legal process. The paperwork for the transfer to the shelter was set in motion immediately. Veronica coordinated with the center's team, while Prosecutor Ramirez arranged for an extension of the protection order to include Lucy's relatives. It was a complex operation, but one that had been well rehearsed, the result of years of perfecting protocols for similar cases. That afternoon, as the Vasquez family continued their emotional reunion in the hospital room, Daniel entered with a small surprise. A tablet. It's from the hospital, he explained with a smile. I thought you might want to see your nephew. Your sister told me you haven't met him yet. Lucy's eyes lit up when Ana opened the video call app and connected with Miguel in Monterrey. The screen filled with the face of her older brother, whose eyes instantly welled up when he saw her. Lou, he whispered, visibly moved. My little sister. Hi, Miguel, she replied, the tears returning effortlessly. After a few minutes of conversation punctuated by emotion, Miguel lifted up a lively 3-year-old with a mischievous smile. Mateo, this is your Aunt Lucy, he said, the one who has been sending you the stuffed dinosaurs. Lucy looked confused at Ana, who hastened to explain. We always told him that the gifts came from you, she said softly. We didn't want him to forget you. Something expanded in Lucy's chest, a warmth she thought she had lost forever. Her family had not only waited for her, they had kept her presence, her memory, her place among them alive. Hello, Mateo, she said in a trembling voice. I'm your Aunt Lucy. When are you coming to play with me? Asked the boy, with the direct innocence of childhood. Soon, Lucy promised, and for the first time in years she felt she could actually keep a promise. Very soon, that night, as her family settled into a nearby hotel, insisting on taking turns so that there would always be someone with her at the hospital, Lucy felt the layers of isolation that Roberto had built around her fall away one by one. With each conversation, each shared memory, each plan for the future, however tentative, she was recovering fragments of the Lucy she had been before him. The next morning, the day of her discharge, Dr. Mendez performed his final checkup. Your physical recovery is going well, he said, but remember that emotional wounds take longer to heal. Continue the treatment you have been prescribed, and don't hesitate to ask for help when you need it. Lucy nodded gratefully for his sincerity. Thank you for saving me, she said simply, for seeing what no one else wanted to see. The doctor smiled warmly. You saved yourself, Lucy. We were just there to support you. At 10 a.m., while Roberto Gutierrez was being escorted to his initial hearing at the Phoenix courthouse, Lucy was leaving through the back door of the hospital in a wheelchair, standard protocol for all discharged patients. Veronica accompanied her along with Ana and Doña Elena. An unmarked car was waiting, driven by a professional-looking woman who introduced herself simply as Raquel, the shelter coordinator. The farewell to her parents was emotional, but not final. They would see each other regularly in safe places as the case progressed. Don Hector, who had gone to the hearing to see the bastard's face, as he put it, would meet up with them later. As the car drove away from the hospital, Lucy looked out the back window as the building that had been the scene of her liberation receded into the distance. A mixture of conflicting emotions bubbled up inside her: fear for the uncertain future, nostalgia for the irretrievable past, but also slowly growing like a fragile plant. "Hope, are you okay?" Anna asked, holding her hand. Lucy considered the question for a moment. Physically, she still hurt. Emotionally, she was raw. The road ahead would be long and difficult. There would be good days and terrible days. The legal system could fail. Roberto Tutucho could find loopholes to slip through. Nothing was guaranteed. "And yet I think I'll be okay," she finally replied. "Not today, maybe not tomorrow, but someday I'll be okay." The car turned a corner, taking a roundabout route to the shelter where Lucy would spend the next few weeks, or even months. A new chapter was beginning, uncertain, but hers. A new beginning with strong roots, those of her family, those of the professionals who had helped her, and perhaps most importantly, those she was rediscovering within herself. Because sometimes true freedom begins precisely like this, not with great victories or perfect endings, but with the simple and revolutionary decision to take a step forward, day after day, regaining one's own voice, one's own story, one's own life. And Lucy Vasquez, after 6 years of silence, had finally begun to speak. 3 months had passed since the day Lucy arrived at the General Hospital of Phoenix with her face disfigured by blows and her soul silenced by fear. 3 months that seemed like both a breath and an eternity. Courtroom number 8 of the Phoenix Court of Justice was plunged into tense silence. Lucy, sitting next to Prosecutor Ramirez, kept her eyes fixed on her clasped hands on the table. She didn't want to look up. She didn't want to meet the gaze of Roberto, who was waiting on the other side of the room, flanked by his defense attorney. "Everything is fine," whispered Anna, sitting right behind her. "We're here with you." Lucy nodded slightly, feeling the comforting weight of her sister's hand on her shoulder. It had been 3 intense months of constant transformation. The shelter had become a true sanctuary where, day by day, she rediscovered fragments of herself that she thought were lost forever. Judge Margarita Valencia entered the room and everyone stood up. She was a woman in her 50s, with a stern but fair expression, known for her firmness in cases of domestic violence. "Please be seated," she said after taking her place. "We are here for the final hearing in case 2762023, the Public Prosecutor's Office versus Roberto Gutierrez Mendoza, for the crimes of continued domestic violence, serious injury, and threats." Lucy finally looked up, but not at Roberto. Instead, she looked at the judge's serene face, finding strength in her institutional presence. "Prosecutor Ramirez, you may proceed with your closing arguments," said the judge. Claudia Ramirez stood up, her posture conveying a confidence that instilled courage in Lucy. "Your Honor, throughout this trial we have presented irrefutable evidence of the systematic pattern of violence perpetrated by the defendant against Lucy Vasquez during 6 years of marriage." She began in a clear, firm voice. X-rays and medical reports document more than 12 fractures in various stages of healing, demonstrating a history of ongoing abuse. Testimony from medical staff at the General Hospital confirms that the injuries presented were inconsistent with the alleged accidental fall initially reported by the defendant. Lucy closed her eyes briefly, remembering the long sessions of preparation for this moment. The prosecutor had been meticulous, helping her structure her testimony, preparing her for cross-examination, teaching her to breathe when panic threatened to overwhelm her. Furthermore, Ramirez continued, the defendant's threatening behavior at the hospital was witnessed by multiple witnesses, including law enforcement officers, confirming the pattern of intimidation described by the victim. Roberto shifted in his seat, visibly uncomfortable. He no longer looked like the imposing, controlling man who had dominated Lucy's life for years. 3 months in pre-trial detention had blurred his image of invulnerability. Finally, Your Honor, there is the courageous testimony of Lucy Vasquez herself. The prosecutor turned briefly toward her with a look of respect. Who? Despite the understandable terror after years of abuse, she found the strength to break her silence and expose the reality she was living. Roberto's defense attorney, a man in an expensive suit with a calculating expression, took notes quickly. Throughout the trial, he had tried to discredit Lucy's testimony, suggesting that she was exaggerating the situations, that she had mental problems, or that she was seeking revenge for alleged infidelities. Fortunately, these strategies had not succeeded in the face of solid medical and testimonial evidence. For all these reasons, the prosecutor concluded, we request the maximum penalty provided for by our legislation for the crimes charged, as well as the indefinite extension of the protection order in favor of the victim and her immediate family. When the prosecutor took her seat, Lucy gave her a grateful look. In recent months, Claudia Ramirez had become much more than a legal representative. She had been a guide, an ally, and sometimes even a confidant. Defense, proceed with your closing arguments, said the judge. Roberto Zolt stood up with a confidence that contrasted with the weakness of his case. Your Honor, the defense maintains that an exaggerated narrative has been constructed around what were simply marital conflicts. He began by provoking an indignant murmur among the audience, which the judge quelled with a stern look. My client has been an exemplary citizen with no criminal record, a respected businessman in the community. The injuries Mrs. Vasquez sustained on the day of her hospital admission were consistent with her initial explanation, an accidental fall down the stairs. Lucy felt nauseous as she listened to them try to minimize 6 years of constant terror, reducing them to mere marital conflicts. It was the same narrative that Roberto had led her to believe for so long, that she was exaggerating, that she was too sensitive, that her reactions were disproportionate. Regarding the incident at the hospital, the lawyer continued, my client acted out of the natural concern of a husband whose wife was hospitalized and who was inexplicably denied access. His frustration was misinterpreted as aggression. Anna gently squeezed Lucy's shoulder, reminding her that she was no longer alone in facing these lies. Therefore, the defense requests acquittal on all charges, considering that there is no conclusive evidence beyond testimony that may be influenced by subjective interpretations of the facts. When the lawyer finished, the judge adjusted her glasses and reviewed her notes for a few moments. The room remained silent, the tension almost palpable. Before proceeding with my decision, she finally said, I would like to ask Ms. Vasquez if she wishes to exercise her right to address the court. Lucy felt the air escape from her lungs. During preparation, the prosecutor had mentioned this possibility to her, but she had decided not to do so, fearing she would break down in front of Roberto. However, now, sitting in that room where not only the legal fate of her attacker would be decided, but also, in a way, her own future, she felt an unexpected impulse. She stood up slowly, her legs trembling, but her resolve firm. Yes, Your Honor, I would like to speak. The judge nodded approvingly. Go ahead. Lucy took a deep breath, just as she had been taught in her therapy sessions at the shelter. As she exhaled, she felt some of her fear dissipate. For 6 years, she began in a soft but clear voice. I lived in a prison without bars. A prison built with beatings, threats, and systematic manipulation. She paused, surprised by the firmness of her own voice. Every morning when I woke up, my first thought was to gauge his mood, to anticipate what might trigger his rage that day. I learned to walk quietly, to speak only when asked, to disappear within my own home. Roberto stared at her from across the room, but for the first time, Lucy did not shrink from his gaze. Her voice continued to grow stronger with each word. When he took me to the hospital 3 months ago, I had lost all hope. I believed I would die in that house at his hands, and that no one would ever know. But then something extraordinary happened. Someone saw through the lie. Someone noticed what I could no longer even name. Lucy glanced briefly at the seats where Dr. Mendez, Carmela, Daniel, and Veronica were sitting. Carmela, Daniel, and Veronica, who had come to the hearing to support her. Those people gave me back something I thought I had lost forever. They showed me that my voice deserved to be heard, that I deserved to live without fear. The room was completely silent. Even the defense attorney had stopped taking notes. "Your Honor, I am not here seeking revenge. I am here because I want the cycle to be broken. I want other women who are going through what I went through to know that there is a way out, that there are people willing to help, that their lives can be different." Lucy turned slightly to look directly at Roberto, something she had not done throughout the entire hearing. She no longer saw the all-powerful monster who had terrorized her for years. She saw an ordinary man, diminished, pathetic in his attempt to maintain control over the uncontrollable. And I want him to understand that despite everything he did to me, I am standing here, speaking, living, that he did not succeed in destroying me, even though he tried with all his might. She ended her statement with a final glance at the judge. "I only ask for justice, Your Honor, not only for myself, but for all the women trapped in the same hell from which I managed to escape." When Lucy returned to her seat, a reverent silence filled the room. Prosecutor Ramirez gently squeezed her hand, a gesture of pride and recognition. Behind her, she could feel the comforting presence of her family, her real family, the one that had never stopped looking for her. Judge Valencia looked at Lucy with an expression of deep respect before speaking. "This court will now proceed to deliver its sentence," she announced. The next few minutes passed as if in slow motion. The judge meticulously detailed the proven facts, the evidence presented, and the aggravating circumstances. Her voice, firm and clear, articulated every reason why the defense's arguments were untenable in the face of the weight of scientific and testimonial evidence. Therefore, the judge concluded, "This court finds Roberto Gutierrez Mendoza guilty of the crimes of continued domestic violence, grievous bodily harm, and threats, sentencing him to 8 years in prison without the possibility of early release." A sob escaped from Lucy's lips. It was not sadness, it was not fear, it was pure and overwhelming relief. 8 years. 8 years to rebuild her life without the constant shadow of terror. In addition, the judge continued, the protection order in favor of Lucy Vasquez and her immediate family members is ratified on a permanent basis, prohibiting the convicted person from any type of contact or approaching within 500 meters, even after serving his sentence. Roberto slammed his fist on the table in frustration, but was quickly restrained by security guards. His face, contorted with rage, was the very picture of helplessness. "The session is adjourned," declared the judge, striking her gavel one last time. The sound of chairs moving and voices gradually rising filled the room as Roberto was escorted out. He passed close to where Lucy was sitting, but this time it was he who looked down. Unable to sustain eye contact, Lucy remained seated for a few moments longer, processing what had just happened. Around her, her world had changed irrevocably. Anna's arms wrapped around her in a protective embrace as tears ran freely down both their cheeks. "It's over, Lou," her sister whispered. It really was over, but Lucy knew it wasn't an ending, but a beginning. The court ruling closed one chapter, but her story of recovery was just beginning to be written. As she left the courthouse, a small crowd awaited her. Her father, whose face showed a mixture of pride and sadness for all his daughter had had to endure. Her mother, whose eyes glistened with unshed tears. Dr. Mendez and his team, who had been the first to see through the lie. Veronica, whose guidance had been instrumental in the early days of her liberation. And several women from the shelter, some current residents of the program, who had come to show their solidarity. Among them was Mariana, a woman in her 40s who had arrived at the shelter 2 weeks after Lucy and had a painfully similar story. They had formed a special bond, sustaining each other's hope during the difficult nights when nightmares woke one or the other. "How are you feeling?" Mariana asked, hugging her tightly. Lucy considered the question. There were so many emotions mixed inside her: relief, exhaustion, sadness for the lost years, fear for the uncertain future, but also steadily growing hope. As if she could breathe fully for the first time in years, she finally replied. The director of the shelter, a woman with a serene presence named Laura Soto, approached with a warm smile. "We are so proud of you, Lucy," she said. "Your courage today in that courtroom inspires us all." Lucy shook her head gently. "It wasn't courage. she replied. "It was survival, and I couldn't have done it without all of you." Prosecutor Ramirez, who had stopped to talk with other court officials, finally approached the group. "Congratulations, Lucy. This ruling is an important precedent. What happens now?" Lucy asked. "Legally, the case is closed, except for possible appeals that your lawyer may attempt, although with little chance of success, given the strength of the evidence." The prosecutor paused. "As for you, only you can decide that." It was a simple but profound truth. For the first time in years, the future was truly in her hands. During the last few weeks at the shelter, she had begun to explore possibilities that had previously seemed unattainable. Resuming her interrupted university studies, perhaps specializing in social work to help other women like her, or simply taking the time to rediscover who she was now, after everything she had been through. "I have some ideas," she said with a small smile. That night, the Vasquez family celebrated the ruling with a simple dinner in the apartment Ana had rented in Phoenix to be close to Lucy during the process. It was not a boisterous celebration. The journey had been too painful for that. It was more a moment of recognition, of gratitude for having made it this far together. "I was thinking," said Lucy, as they shared dessert, "of perhaps staying in Phoenix a little longer." Her parents looked at her in surprise. They had assumed that with the trial over, Lucy would return with them to New Mexico. "Why, my little girl?" asked Doña Elena gently. "The shelter offered me a position as an assistant counselor," she explained, "to help women who are just arriving, share my experience, and support them in the first few days, which are the most difficult." She paused, searching for the right words. "I feel like I could make a difference, Mom, that all of this would have some meaning if I can use it to help others." Don Hector nodded slowly, and Lucy saw in his eyes an understanding that moved her deeply. "You were always the most stubborn of my daughters," he said, his voice hoarse with emotion, "and the strongest, even though you didn't know it yourself. Besides," Ana added with a smile, "it's not like I'm alone here. My work contract can be extended, and this apartment is big enough for both of us." Relief flooded Lucy. She wouldn't have to choose between her family and this new purpose that was beginning to take shape inside her. "Thank you," she said simply, but those two syllables contained oceans of gratitude. The next morning, Lucy woke up before dawn, made herself a cup of coffee, and stepped out onto the apartment's small balcony. As she watched the city of Phoenix slowly awaken, she thought of all the women who, at that very moment, were living through the same hell she had survived. Women trapped in houses that were prisons, in relationships that were sentences, in silences that were tombs. But she also thought of all the Carmelas, the Dr. Mendez, the Veronicas, and the prosecutors like Ramirez, who were out there, seeing the invisible, hearing the unspoken, reaching out hands that could become lifelines. The sun began to peek over the buildings, bathing the city in new light. Lucy closed her eyes, allowing the warmth to caress her face. The physical scars had begun to fade. The emotional ones would take much longer, perhaps never disappearing completely. But she had learned that scars are not only marks of past pain, they are also testimonies of healing, of resilience, of life that continues, despite everything. Somewhere in the city, a bell rang, marking the beginning of a new day. Lucy opened her eyes and smiled. The cycle had been broken, and with that break, a whole universe of possibilities unfolded before her, waiting to be explored with the most precious gift she had regained, her freedom. If this story touched your heart, we invite you to explore more content on our channel. We have many more exciting and thought-provoking stories that, like this one, seek to inspire you and show you that there is always hope. Click on the video below and join us for another story that is sure to captivate you from the very beginning. Don't forget to subscribe, leave your comments, and share this video with those you think might need it. Thank you for being part of this community. See you next time.